I think companies need to be realistic about how big of a gap they need to really be different
Yeah.
in whether it's NPS or some other kind of customer satisfaction measurement. One researcher told me that it takes at least 3 points of difference on a 100-point scale to even be noticed.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I'm your host, Jeremy D'Souza, and today we have a customer experience expert with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our amazing guest, allow me to quickly introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code digital CX platform, available across 14 channels with more than 45,000 solutions created and deployed across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. Run the Engati blog, the video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our wonderful guest. Bob Thompson is the founder and CEO of CustomerThink. With over 2 decades of experience in customer-facing roles and another 15 years of experience in customer management consulting, he aims to help leaders understand and implement habits to enable organizations to not only survive in highly competitive markets, but to dominate them and create a legacy of success. He's written Hooked on Customers, a guide on how to be a customer-centric firm. His goal is to harness the collective intelligence of customer-centric thought leaders through his collaborative platform, CustomerThink, to help business leaders understand how to create mutually beneficial customer relationships. But before we dive into our interview with Bob, don't forget to subscribe to Engati and hit the bell icon to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders from across the world. Bob, we're very thrilled to have you with us on the show today.
Thanks, it's great to be with you.
Okay, so Bob, you've written Hooked on Customers. Could you shed some light on the 5 habits of leading customer-centric firms?
Yeah, sure. It's the book is actually a product of, or the end result of almost 15 years of research. I published it in 2014.
Yeah.
And it started with just, as I did my work and frankly learned from our own community, customerthink.com, which is currently getting almost 3 million visitors a year. I started to find some common patterns, like what is it that is different about these companies that are doing better than others? What are their behaviors? Because, as I'm sure you know, many companies say that they want to be more customer focused. They're buying into the customer experience movement big time. 7 or 8 out of 10 executives say it's important. And yet what my research and many other researchers find is that relatively few companies are able to actually excel at the things that they say they're trying to do. So why is that? And the answer that I came to is that it's not that companies have the wrong intentions, because they clearly don't. It's not even that they have the wrong strategy, because many of them are saying that they want to do things that their customers are going to appreciate more and all that. It's really about execution. It's about how they operate internally. And so that I boiled that down into 5 habits. What I mean by a habit is something that is done routinely and frequently. It's just a part of how you get up in the morning and have your, like, I have my morning coffee here. This is a habit, all right? So companies have habits too. And so the 5 habits that I developed through this observation and through some quantitative research as well is, first of all, and one that I think most people would understand intuitively, is to listen, to really understand what drives your customers' behavior, and then get feedback from them and take action on that feedback. So listening, that's of course a very key part of customer experience thinking as well. The second habit is to think, to apply reasoning and analytics, and this is a great role for technology in many cases, to make good fact-based decisions. So you're not doing things just because you always did it that way, and you're trying to guide decisions based on what's valuable to customers. The third thing brings in the employee. It's to empower employees to do the things that are going to not only advance the company's strategy, which we all get, but also to be responsive to employee needs. And then the last two are, I think, perhaps a bit more controversial to some. These are the most difficult ones for really any firm to master. And that is to create new value that's about innovation, and to delight, which means to not just do the basic requirements all the time, to have a strategy for exceeding customer expectations at least some of the time. It's because these moments where you do something that's unexpected in either a positive or a negative way are what we remember. We don't remember every single interaction. We don't, tabulate them in our minds and give them a score. There's a few things that really stand out in our mind as we go through our interactions with the company. And so the ability to create these moments that really are memorable is what I mean by delight. So those are the 5 habits. They work, together. It's not that any one is more important than the other, but these 5 habits are what I studied and wrote about in my book.
I absolutely agree that you have to create those moments that are going to be memorable to your customers, because you don't really remember every single thing. And creating those unexpected moments by going out of the way is probably how you would create some of those peaks which your customers are actually going to remember, rather than like a linear experience. What do you say?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, Bob, you did mention scores, but is there a scorecard of any sort for evaluating the customer centricity of a company?
I didn't put out a formal scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some formal research, and that could be developed into a scorecard if companies wanted to do it. But a simpler way of approaching this is in my book, each of the 5 habits is written about extensively in a chapter. And at the end, there's what I call a food for thought. There's 5 questions. And so, I'll just read a couple of them here so you get an idea. So like for listen, here are the questions that I pose. And these actually form a quantitative basis for a quantitative study. So you could score these like on a 0 to 5 or 0 to 7, something like that. Do you understand what the key drivers are of your customers' loyalty, right? So that's not just about getting feedback. It's about really doing research to know what drives loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting both solicited and unsolicited feedback? Do you listen to your customers' behavior? So that's really about looking at the sometimes called the digital footprints. Are you able to take the the things that you're doing in your transactions, in your CRM system, and so on? Do you reward employees for improving loyalty? Do you close the loop? So what I'm suggesting is that listeners here, if you want to score your own company, if you get the book, just take these 5 questions and then give yourself a score on 0 to 5. That's the scale that I used. And what I found is that leading companies tended to score at an average of around 4, and most other firms that are still working, on this, these behaviors or habits, score quite a bit below that. So you can come up with your own score very easily. But frankly, I wrote the book more as a way to get people thinking about all the dimensions of customer-centric behavior. It's not just about customer service. It's not just about listening. It's really about how you take these 5 habits and integrate them and make them a part of your company culture.
Makes sense. Bob, what are the stages, in your opinion, of a customer-centric journey, and have they been moved around, shuffled a bit due to the digital transformation which we are forced to go through because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think we're all going to learn the answer to that here in the next year. But I think it's pretty clear that any disruption like this is going to accelerate certain trends. So I can tell you from my own personal experience that Some ways that I went out and like to shop for things, and like buying shoes, for example. I like to try on shoes. Okay, that's my own personal habit. Of course, Zappos has been around for a long time, and people can order 5 pairs and send back the 4 that don't fit quite right or they don't like. But I never use that process because I like to try on shoes. Well, with the pandemic has really forced me to change my behavior. And what I found is that some of these newer ways of shopping and getting goods and trying things on and whatever are actually pretty cool. So it's some of them are going to stick with me past the pandemic. And I think that's going to be true of a lot of people, that when you're forced to do things, you have to do them, then you try it and say, hey, that was pretty good, or that wasn't that bad. Now, on the other hand, I don't know that, going to a restaurant, yes, you can get takeout food, but going to a restaurant or a bar is a social occasion. And, when the bars and the restaurants are open, because right now in California, they're closed due to the pandemic, that we're all going to go back to the bars and the restaurants, and takeout is going to decline back perhaps to where it was before. So there will be some changes. There'll be a snapback in some industries, and others, I think, like retail, are going to be changed permanently for the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a few which actually the pandemic kind of helped them increase triability. But yeah, some of them are definitely going to go back, especially takeout. Bob, how can you manage and evaluate the behavior needed to shape a customer-centered culture?
Well, that's actually probably the most important question. It's really a question of leadership of companies, is that if you can't encourage the right sorts of behaviors in all of your employees, then the right strategy is going to go nowhere. So I think it starts first with leadership, and I actually did some follow-on research in this subject after the book was published. The most important thing is leading by example. That executives, and this is true whether it's Jeff Bezos or any leader, is that what you do is what people watch and what they emulate. And so leaders that say you ought to listen to customers, but then they never have time for customer meetings and they don't consume any of the feedback data themselves. They don't ask questions in meetings. So what does your customer think about this? They're not setting a good example. And so the leadership and their personal behaviors is incredibly important. These are cues that employees look to decide how they're going to behave. Beyond that, though, you have to support it with the right sort of metrics and I call it a reward system. By that, I don't mean just money. It's really about how people are congratulated, promoted, thanked, all the things that give them feedback that says, yeah, you're doing the right job. So the reward system, the KPIs and all of that is also really important. So if you go to a company and you say, how do people get ahead here? What is it that they do that gets them promoted, that gets them bigger salary increases? That will give you clues as to what the real KPIs are. And, if they're not helping people be more customer centered, then predictably you can find that the strategy is not going to be implemented very well.
And that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, leadership does have to set the example over here. You mentioned Zappos a little earlier. They pretty much have everyone in their organization take customer calls all the time, even the CEO. So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Bob, are there any other thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Well, yeah, I think the thing that I found missing in a lot of thinking in the CX world as well as CRM is that is really, when you're in business, you're in a competitive race, right? So it's not about getting a little bit better than you were yesterday within your own company. You have to maintain a sense of how you stack up, how you compete with other firms that your customers will consider. And this is something that, unfortunately, the majority of companies don't do a very good job of. They tend to do better as they get bigger. But uh, so what I'm saying is that it's whether you use a customer-centric thinking or customer experience or whatever, that you think, well, I want to perform better than I did yesterday. You have to also say, is our competitors doing the same thing? And by and large, they are. So it's really difficult to get a competitive edge when you're making these small improvements, congratulating yourselves, and then you turn around a year or two later and you say, I'm not getting any business results. I'm not getting higher revenue growth. I'm not getting enhanced levels of customer loyalty. Well, why is that? I mean, our NPS score just went up by 10 points. Isn't that great? Well, your competitor score may have gone up by the same amount. So I think maintaining this sense of your competitive positioning is still part of management, right? It's not just about your customer and just about, improving how your employees do their thing, but you have to do it faster and more aggressively and better than your competitors, or you still don't get the benefits of this sort of thinking.
Absolutely. If your competitors are doing the same thing as you, or even if they're doing something marginally better, you're still stuck in the same rut. And yeah, at this point, organizations can do better than what they previously did. They can even do better than what their immediate competitors are doing. But let's face it, customer experience is being compared not in like an immediate sector. Your customer experience is being compared to the customer experience of like the best in the business, even Amazon, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's been a relatively new thing over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, is that companies look to leaders in other industries, and you're in maybe a B2B manufacturing company, and you say, yeah, but I'd really like to be able to to buy products like I can on Amazon. Why can't I do that? I mean,
Absolutely.
this process is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So it just ups the ante for how companies are going to move forward. That the bar is higher, and it's not necessarily your immediate competitors. I would just add one other thing that I found in talking to some PhDs that study this carefully, that I think companies need to be realistic about how big of a gap they need to really be different
Yep.
in whether it's NPS or some other kind of customer satisfaction measurement. One researcher told me that it takes at least 3 points of difference on a 100-point scale to even be noticed. So, it's, again, these small changes are helpful, and I think a lot of companies like Toyota have, small changes every year consistently add up to a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not minimizing that, but at some point you have to look around and say, well, am I significantly different enough from my competitors that my customers will even notice?
Absolutely.
And in most cases, that's just not the case.
Yeah, pretty true. It's pretty similar to the peaks. They're not going to remember you until you create something dramatic, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this has been fantastic. Folks, you should definitely head over to CustomerThink, explore everything over there. It's like a treasure trove of knowledge. Bob, where else can they reach out to you?
Well, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn as well, but really the main way to get in touch with me is through CustomerThink, or just email me directly at bob@customerthink.com.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot for giving us all your time and your insights. They were really valuable. I'm sure the audience is going to love this episode. Folks, we will be back with a new episode and a new expert really soon, so stay tuned. We'll see you around for the next one. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you.